What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be ranking all 20 episodes of The Flash Season 8, and before anybody says something, yes, Pagey did this video. I'm going to give credit to him for this idea. Also want to quickly apologize for the lack of videos recently. This is going to be one of, hopefully starting off a better schedule with me uploading videos, hopefully every other day. Maybe I'll have 2 days in between, but I should be getting out 3 to 4 videos a week, just so you guys are aware of that. But yeah, let's get right into it. So starting off at number 20, and what I think is the worst episode of The Flash Season 8 is episode 14, titled A Funeral for a Friend. Now, I know a lot of you guys expected episode 17 to be here. Don't worry, it's number 19. But episode 14, I think, was just so boring. I mean, they tried to, split up the episode of, different ways of how people are dealing with Frost's death. The thing with that is, Frost, in my opinion, was a terrible character. So the fact that they're having the characters all grieving, somebody Joe West, who barely did anything with Frost, is sobbing over her death, is just, it's ridiculous to me. I just don't like that they dedicated an entire episode to a funeral and to Team Flash just grieving over a character that a lot of people started to not like as much. So that, in my opinion, was a reason why it's the worst episode of the season. But then, as I just said, at number 19 is episode 17, which was the Allegra focused episode. Now, the reason this isn't the worst is because also in this episode we have had a little bit of a Barry and Thawne storyline, as well as Barry, discovering that there's a new speedster. I actually really liked that part of the episode, and if you actually look at it, I'm pretty sure that's 20 minutes of the entire episode is Barry, Thawne, and this new speedster. So I just skipped over the Allegra parts and just watched those, and hey, I found the episode pretty entertaining besides the Allegra stuff. So now at number 18, I have episode 7. Now, this one was the episode where everyone got locked down. I believe that's actually the title of the episode, a lockdown. They were locked in CCPD. There was a hostage situation there with Goldface, who returned. Now, everyone loves Goldface. He's a big meme on the show. I thought he was actually not too bad in this episode. I kind of liked his role. And I think this episode was, for a filler episode, I'd say it was actually not too bad. It was entertaining. I've said in the past that, CCPD is a terrible location now, and they really need to fix that, which I think they definitely still need to do. But in this episode, I thought it was actually a little bit better. I sort of started to like Kramer just a little bit more in this episode, and I like that Barry was doing just a little more CSI stuff, I guess. Even though we couldn't really see him in use his powers very much, I still thought this episode wasn't too bad, although super bland overall. At number 17, I have episode 9. Now, this was the second episode of the Black Flame stuff, and if I'm being honest, there were a couple of cool action scenes, I guess, in this episode, but overall, also in this episode, it was really focused on Chester and, the Black Flame impersonating Chester's father. This episode was, in my opinion, so boring. It was such a boring episode. I did not like this episode whatsoever. I mean, I guess it was all right in some places, but just overall, really boring episode. And then coming right after that, number 16 is episode 10. Now, this is the one that focused on Frost, Caitlin, and their mother, and that also, in my opinion, boring, really boring. I thought that, those couple of episodes, I was just thinking, I thought the show was about the Flash, right? It's the Flash. It's not the family of Snows. It's nothing like that. It's just those couple of episodes, I was really not liking this, Black Flame Deathstorm arc, just because of how boring those two were. But overall, still a couple of cool action scenes, I guess, in those couple of episodes. Number 15 is episode 6. Now, this one I thought was actually a lot better than a lot of people think. This is the second lowest rated episode I heard of the season, and that kind of surprised me, because I think Bart and Nora in this episode were really, fun to see. We got some future scenes with Jay Garrick. That was cool to see. And then a couple of teasers in regards to Jay Garrick's storyline with him with the JSA and all that, and we get to go back in time and see Eddie Thawne and Barry in his coma. I thought all of that was actually really cool, even though Barry didn't really appear in it. I thought this was probably the best episode that Barry didn't appear in. So now at number 14 is episode 8. Now, this one was the start of the Black Flame stuff, and I really didn't think this one was going to be that good based off the character that they had return as the villain, the guy from season 4 who shouted just, "I want my money." I didn't think that, you know, this episode was going to be that good when I saw that he was returning, but then they added the dynamic of like the father-son stuff and added the Henry Allen, Barry Allen dynamic to it as well, and that made this episode, in my opinion, pretty good. Now, like I said, the rest of these episodes so far, or, you know, coming up in the list, are going to be, you know, I think pretty watchable, pretty good episodes, and this one was definitely one of them just because of that dynamic and the emotional stuff between Henry and Barry Allen. Even though Henry Allen is obviously dead, I thought this episode was still not too bad. At number 13 is episode 16. This was the one where Barry had had his like age like rapidly increasing. It was the Curious Case of Bartholomew Allen, episode 16. I thought that this one, you know, didn't really, you know, do anything with a storyline that was going on in the show, but it was just a really fun episode, and I liked that they added it in here. You could consider this one a filler episode, I guess, but I think if it's a filler episode, I think it's definitely one of the best filler episodes we've ever had, because I was really entertained by this episode for the most part. So now at number 12 is episode 13. Now this is the episode where Team Flash defeated Deathstorm, and that's really the only problem I had with this episode is how they defeated him. I just think that, you know, the Flash should have had some involvement in his defeat. It shouldn't have just been Frost versus Deathstorm. I think that was kind of dumb. But I do like the scene with Frost's death. I think that was done very well. I actually was kind of reminded of that one scene from season 3 where Caitlin, like, you know, she was fine and then she like had a seizure and almost died. That really reminded me of that scene. I thought that was done very well. The acting by Danielle Panabaker to Frost's death, I think, was great. I think, you know, if anybody should have reacted that way, it should have definitely been her. So overall, I really like this episode. Just wish they tweaked some things of how Deathstorm was defeated, because, you know, with these graphic novels, you just kind of have to get rid of the villain so you can go on to the next graphic novel, which, you know, that's the one main problem I have with it. So now at number 11 is episode 12, and I think this one is above episode 13 just because we saw so many returning characters. Barry's mother, Eddie Thawne, there was, you know, Chester's father, and, you know, whatever, Allegra's cousin, who cares about those. But I just, you know, seeing Eddie Thawne and Iris again, I think that was pretty cool. And just one more thing I want to go over with this episode. I thought this episode was way more intense than episode 13, which is why it's a little bit higher. But just one thing, I mentioned this before, it's just that seeing like Barry hallucinate his mother has like no emotional value anymore, just because the Speed Force is also in form of Barry's mother. It just doesn't make any sense why they did that, and I think if they never did that with the Speed Force, I think this would have been a way better, you know, few scenes with Barry seeing his mother. So yeah, episode 12 is at number 11. Now getting into the top 10, we're going to start off with episode 15, which is Into the Still Force. Now, it wasn't as cool as the End of the Speed Force episode. I just think it was still, you know, it was pretty entertaining. It was cool to see Barry going into a different force besides the Still Force, or the Speed Force rather. But yeah, seeing Nora in this episode, I thought she had a great storyline in this episode as well. Getting a couple of teasers in regards to, you know, Max Mercury. Hopefully they bring him in season 9. That'd be so cool. That was cool to see, or, you know, hear in this episode. And, you know, just the plan that Barry and Nora had to come up with to get out of the Still Force reminded me a lot of the earlier seasons when Team Flash would come up with these ridiculous plans to defeat the villain. I thought that was really cool to see that in that episode as well. But now at number 9, I have episode 11. Now, the reason why this one's so high is obviously because of the Ronnie Raymond stuff. And this one, I was just on the edge of my seat the entire time. I've probably said that before, but this episode was so good in my opinion. Now, it's only at number 9, which means I found a lot more episodes better than this. But this episode is definitely probably my, it was my favorite of the Deathstorm storyline. Just because, you know, the anticipation of Ronnie Raymond possibly returning really felt like a season 1, season 2 episode. And I really liked basically everything that they did. You know, Caitlyn's still trying to get Ronnie Raymond back after all these years. Just it was so cool to see him again, even if he ended up being Deathstorm in the end. But yeah, this is one of the more intense episodes of the season. At number 8, I have the season finale, episode 20, and this one, it was it was a very good episode of The Flash. Like, it was an entertaining episode of The Flash, nothing wrong with that. But the context, I did not really like it. You know, this could have been the series finale. I would not have been satisfied if this was the series finale. I don't know why they, like, that was my main problem with the last storyline or the last graphic novel of the season, is that they brought the Forces into it so much. Hopefully in season 9 they don't use the Forces at all, because I don't really like them. Although I guess it sort of made sense here that, you know, the negative forces made Thawne the negative Speed Force avatar, whatever. I just really didn't like the Forces too much. I felt like they were the main villain instead of Thawne. Other than that, though, this is a really entertaining episode, and overall, not a bad episode at all. So now at number 7, I have episode 3, or Armageddon Part 3. Now, in my opinion, this is the worst episode of Armageddon, and here's the reasoning for that. Now, there were a lot of great things in this episode. There was Barry, you know, after he realizes Joe is dead, at the end of the episode, he figures out that Thawne's still alive, or not still alive, but rather he's in the future, and he's responsible for Armageddon, all of that stuff. And, you know, obviously the stuff with Black Lightning was really cool. Barry versus Black Lightning. We got a little bit of an Oliver Queen reference in this episode. It's just the other storyline that was happening with Top returning. I don't care about her character at all, and she got a ton of screen time in this episode, and that really made me hate this episode a lot more. So yeah, I would just change that, and this is basically a perfect episode. But for now, it's gonna stay here at number 7. At number 6 is episode 5. Now, I know a lot of you guys consider this episode to be the worst episode of Armageddon, but here's my reasoning for why I like it so much. It's just because of all the Reverse Flash stuff. Yes, I know you guys, you're all sick of the Reverse Flash. You don't think that he was that good in this episode, and I understand where you're coming from, but here's why I like it. It's because they actually did some more Reverse Flash origin stuff in this episode this late in the show. Now, a lot of you guys are like, what? That doesn't even make sense. He was literally didn't even say the correct origin, you know, compared to all these other times he's explained his origin. This one is actually more comic book accurate. This is a more comic book accurate origin in season 8. If you guys don't know, in the comics, Reverse Flash, he paints himself as a hero by creating crimes himself and then stopping the crimes. But here's the thing, then Barry ends up showing up and he figures out what Thawne's really up to and he stops him. And that's why Thawne decides to hate the Flash and becomes the Reverse Flash in the comics. They basically said that exact same thing in episode 5, which really made me happy. I actually really enjoyed that scene, and that really made this episode feel a lot better for me personally. At number 5 is episode 1. Now, this is a great way to start off the season. You had Ray Palmer's return as the Atom, maybe the last time we'll ever see him as the Atom, which I thought was so cool to see, you know, him return. We also got to look at Despero for the first time. He looked like a really threatening villain, and he continued to be a really threatening villain. You also saw Barry using more, he was using his powers the correct way. Like, he was creating speed mirages, he was using flash time. Like, that's what I really enjoyed about this episode. It's just the Royal Flush Gang, they're not very good villains, so if they just, you know, maybe had a different villain be the villain of the episode instead, I think this would have been a much better episode, maybe top 3. But yeah, the thing I liked the most about this was how Barry was actually using his powers correctly. So at number 4 is episode 18, and this is the one where we saw Matt Ledger return as Eobard Thawne. Even though he wasn't the Reverse Flash, it was still really cool to see him back again. We got to look at Mina Dawin as Fast Track, which, you know, that was pretty cool. Her suit's kind of lame, but other than that, I thought it was pretty cool. Just the thing about episode 18, the writing for this episode was so much better than the rest of the season. I don't know what it was, but this was, they just, like, I guess they know how to write Barry and Reverse Flash, or, you know, Eobard Thawne, because that was really good in this episode. The dynamic between those two was really good. And you also had this was the episode Diggle appeared in, I believe, unless that was episode 19. I believe this was episode 18 that Diggle returned in. You know, I really hope they get back to his Green Lantern storyline somehow. I think he'll return in season 9, even though there's a lot of speculation that he won't. So I'm really hoping they, you know, change that up a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode, and I think it deserves to be in the top 4. So now at number 3, I have episode 4, or Armageddon Part 4. This one I think was fantastic, just besides one thing, and that was, of course, the storyline of the "why don't you love BS." Nobody cares about that. Zero. Whenever I rewatch that episode, I skip those scenes because nobody cares about that stuff. Damien Dark's really cool to see in this episode. Barry as the Reverse Flash as the Flash. It was really cool to see that. The Reverse Flashpoint was awesome. I liked how they did that. And, you know, Barry time traveling, that's always cool to see. So yeah, overall this episode was a lot of fun, and I really liked how they did most of it. So yeah, that definitely deserves a spot in my top 3. But at number 2 is going to be episode 2. Now, a lot of you guys have this one as your number 1. Totally understand that. That's totally fine with me. But episode 2, I think, was just, it was amazing. So basically, what I really liked about this episode was that one scene where Barry, he uses his powers to like defeat Zotar. He like creates like, he like explodes in midair. I think that was so cool. And also the scene where, you know, Team Flash is like literally against Barry because he's going crazy. He literally starts to think he's crazy. And then of course the end where we find out that Joe is dead and Barry had no idea. That was one of the most crazy twists we've ever seen on The Flash, and I really liked how they did that. And then of course number 1 is episode 19. Just everything leading up to you know, Iris's death was so clever in my opinion. And then of course the ending with Reverse Flash literally ripping himself out of Matt Letcher's Reverse Flash. That was crazy. That was an absolutely insane scene. I really wish that set up for a little bit of a better finale. But yeah, that is my list of my Flash Season 8 episodes ranked. But anyways, I'd say that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to comment your thoughts on this video down below, as well as your own ranking of your Flash Season 8 episodes. Just comment that down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.